Welcome to part 4 in the video series about porn and your brain. Today we are only going to talk about how to heal your brain after porn addiction. Or more accurately, how to reverse the addiction-related brain changes. And if you haven't already, I urge you to go back and watch all the other parts first and then come back to this one. Alright, so let's start with desensitization as it's the biggest one, and since it's also the one we can be the most proactive with and have the most options with. The number one thing to fix desensitization is, of course, to stop using the porn. And another important thing for people to know here is that if you have any other addictions going on besides porn addiction and you are still engaging in those, then your desensitized reward system won't heal if you just give up the porn. And then, as you remember in part 2 of this video series, I mentioned that it's possible to knock out some of your dopamine receptors even if you're not addicted. That means that this is why you also have to be careful and moderate your use of other supernormal stimuli as well. And if you're now wondering what is a supernormal stimuli, well, it's a good question. A supernormal stimuli is basically something that is more stimulating for your brain's reward system than we can naturally found in nature. Things like video games, social media, online gambling, junk food, alcohol, and so on. So for example, even if you're not addicted to alcohol, but you drink quite a lot of it, you should know that that really hammers your poor dopamine receptors. The same goes if you spend a huge amount of time playing super stimulating video games, or if you spend many hours a day mindlessly scrolling on social media. Now listen up here. It's not like you can't do things like that in moderation and never reverse your desensitization, because you certainly can, but you should know that all those activities are highly dopamine driven, and if you go hard with them, you are definitely slowing down the healing, and if you go really hard with them, you simply won't be able to upregulate those dopamine receptors. Alright, so those are the things you should remove or be careful with. Let's now look at things you can add. Sunshine has actually been shown to help upregulate your dopamine receptors. Kind of a bummer that the winter is here right now. But in general, being outside when the weather is good is beneficial for your dopamine system. Intermittent fasting has also been shown to help increase the number of your dopamine receptors. Physical exercise as well, and especially high-intensity interval training. Now, since I know many of the guys out here are willing to do pretty much anything to recover, I have to put a warning here. Never ever take any of these to the extremes, because you can hurt yourself if you do. That goes for all of them, so educate yourself on them first and use your head here. For example, if you start overtraining, you are not doing your dopamine system any favor. Cold showers have also been shown to increase both dopamine and your dopamine receptors. And I seriously believe that you can speed up the recovery of your desensitized dopamine system by taking cold showers frequently. Socializing could potentially also help a bit with your dopamine receptors, especially if you somehow manage to win some competition or win something else, or somehow climb in status in that particular setting and group of people, because biology has made it so that you will get a small reward by getting a few more of those small dopamine receptors if you somehow climb in status or win something. Remember, desensitization means you have less of those receptors, so getting more of them is exactly what we want. Some over-the-counter supplements that may help create a few more dopamine receptors are CDP-choline and myo-inositol. But probably the number one most effective thing you can do to help speed up the recovery of desensitization is implementing different dopamine fasting protocols from time to time. Now, it's impossible to say just how much faster you can recover by doing this, but from all the things I've seen and experienced myself, I'd say it's probably quite significant. Now, this video is already going to get very long, so I won't go into detail about exactly how to do dopamine fasting here. But if you want to know more about this, I do have a whole online course about this and about all kinds of different ways of doing dopamine fasting and about what's the best way of doing different protocols. And you can find a link to that course under the video. But I don't want to make this a promotion of my own stuff, so I'll just leave it at that and we will quickly move on to the next one, which is the malfunctional stress system. Again, the number one most important thing is of course to quit the porn. The second one is going to be physical exercise, and with this brain change, zone 2 cardio seems to be the most effective one for calming your anxiety down. If you don't know what zone 2 cardio is, then you can easily Google it. And I know what I'm about to say next is going to sound strange to some of you, but I'm being absolutely serious here. The third point is accept that it's going to take some time for this one to reverse, about 1 to 2 months or so, for some maybe a bit longer. The reason for why this is important is because when it comes to things like anxiety, then if you resist that negative feeling, or even if you start asking yourself questions like, why do I have to feel like this, or how long will this last? Then you should know that you are now making your situation twice as bad. Why? Well, it's like the great Buddha said, anytime we suffer misfortune, 2 arrows fly our way. Being struck by an arrow is painful. Being struck by a second arrow is even more painful. In life, we can't always control the first arrow. However, the second arrow is our reaction to the first. So the second arrow is optional. So, what I mean by this is that if your porn addiction has caused a malfunctioning stress system for you with anxiety and stress as a result, then that's the first arrow. But you can avoid the pain of the second arrow by not resisting it and not asking yourself these kinds of questions. So, other than this, there's not much more you can do about this brain change. Let it take the time it needs. Let's move on to hypofrontality. And here too, the number one thing is of course to stop using the porn. And the second most effective thing is meditation. Yes, there are many studies out there showing how people who meditate regularly have a much better functioning prefrontal cortex, and I fully believe you can help speed up this brain change by doing a lot of meditation. And physical exercise is also going to help here. As you remember, hypofrontality means less blood flow to your PFC, and physical exercise of course helps to increase blood flow to your brain. The third thing you can do here is to train your no-go muscle. In other words, practice to not do something you have an urge to do. For example, you're sitting at your kitchen table and you hear that you get a notification on your phone and you instantly get an urge to check what it is. Well, you can practice your no-go muscle by making yourself wait for 10 minutes or so before you check it. And this sounds so simple, but it really works on building a stronger PFC. Same thing when you are doing physical exercise, for example. Let's say you're out running. It's pretty painful, and after a while you will naturally get an urge to just stop running. Well, if you ignore that urge and you keep on going a few more minutes, then you are also training this part of your brain. Now again, warning here, this doesn't mean you should take physical exercise to the extremes, but you already know that by now, right? But you can always ignore that urge to stop running at least 3 to 4 times before you actually listen to it. The same thing goes if you are taking a cold shower. If you override the first urge to turn off the water, well, again, you are training this part of the brain. And then desensitization. Again, the number one thing for you to do here is to stop using the porn. And then with this one, there's unfortunately not much else you can do about this lifelong brain change other than to don't feed the addiction and avoid porn substitutes. So for example, let's say you are trying to go for porn use in moderation. Well, if it really is the case that you have developed a real addiction to porn, then going for moderation is probably not going to work, because every time you're using it, you are feeding these sensitized pathways. And by doing so, you never allow them to become weaker and fall asleep. And also avoid using all kinds of different porn substitutes, because they also feed desensitized porn pathways in your brain and will prevent them from becoming weaker. And by porn substitutes, I mean any form of digital activity you do in order to arouse yourself sexually. So when it comes to sexual things, whenever in doubt, say yes to real life people and no to artificial digital sexually arousing stuff. Now, if you are wondering if you are addicted to porn or not, or if you think you might need some helpful tips on how to quit using the porn, then I would highly recommend that you download my free 90-day no porn advice and tool guide right now by using the link under the video. In the end of that guide, there is also a link to a porn addiction test that you can take to find out where you stand. Now, this is not a big online course or anything like that, but it's a really helpful and easy to read PDF guide. And again, I'm giving it away to you 100% free of charge as a bit of help on your journey towards transforming your life. This is Scandinavian Bob signing out for today. And as always, I wish you all the best on your journey to become the strongest version of yourself.